Okay, so welcome to the part 2. So what we were doing earlier is we were creating an array which contains all the list of the food items we have into our store. Let's say we have paneer tikka, and we also have beef, okay, etc. So these are the items we have in our store. We're going to check if the food is empty, which means if user hasn't entered anything, then the message we want to display is equal to please enter the food item you want to order. Okay, and if that's not so, we can say message is equal to, we will check if user has entered any input. We will check if that item is there in the array. Okay, so we'll use the in array function. Okay, so we'll check food in array, food array. So we'll check whether the input entered by user is there into this array or not, which means whether we have that item or not. Okay, and if that is true, then we can just say we have foods. Otherwise, we can say we don't have foods, which is what the user has entered. Okay, all right, and then finally we can go ahead and echo the message. Okay, so this is pretty much just what we need to do into our foodstore.php. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and create a JavaScript file. Okay, so let's do that, because remember AJAX is going to help us get all the details with the help of JavaScript or jQuery, you can say. So let's create foodstore.js. Okay, we also need to include this file here, so script source JavaScript, sorry, foodstore.js. We also need the jQuery, so let's include that as well. Script source. Okay, so we definitely need the jQuery. So I have the jQuery over here, so we can take it from here. Okay, we can create a file called jQuery.js. Query.js. Okay. Right, there we go. We got our jQuery.js file as well. So we're just going to include this file, include the script. Okay, jQuery.js. All right. Now let's go to our foodstore.js. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and create a self-executing function. Okay, so function, going to pass this jQuery $sign. Okay, and we will include jQuery here so that the jQuery $sign is accessible to us inside this function. Okay, so let's create a variable called user input. Okay, right, and we'll create another variable called output dev content. Okay, so basically what we're trying to do over here is that we're going to go ahead and get the data from this input, okay, which is here. We're going to get this data and we're going to send the AJAX request to this file, which is the PHP file, okay, the data, and that data will be received by this $_post with this food, okay, and that data will be used okay, and processed, and then it will return a value which is, in fact, echo a value which is message, and that message we're going to cache that, and we're going to apply that message into the output div that we have created. Okay, so which will go ahead and display over here. Okay, that's what we're trying to accomplish. So let's continue from there. So we're going to create another variable which is called output div content, and we're trying to get hold of this div where we're going to append the message. Okay, so let's create that. So we can do document dot get element by ID, and that's the name of this div is, the ID of this div is output div. We're going to use that output div. Okay, right, now what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to select user input, okay, which is basically this div here, user input. Okay, this div here, we're going to select that. Okay, and we're going to say on key up, which means every time a user enters something, then this function should be called. So we're going to add this event listener. Okay, and we're going to say user input, which is the variable that we just defined, is equal to dollar this, which means the area where the user has an input, this dot val. Okay, so basically this is going to get us whatever has been stored over here, so I can show that to you. Let's do a console log over here, user input, and let's see, let's enter something. See, whatever has been entered by the user, we're able to get this information. So we're getting this information so that we can send this user input, which is what has been entered over here, via AJAX to this file, and this is going to receive it in $_post, and we're going to then process this information and return this message, and in this message we're going to append it to the div, which is the output div here. Okay, so here. All right, great. So let's take that off. Don't need that. Okay. So we need to create a function which is for the AJAX request, and this function, let's name it as process. Okay, so in this function what we're going to do is we're going to use a jQuery AJAX function which is called jQuery.post. Okay, so basically this function requires 3 parameters. I'll just show it to you. Okay, requires 3 parameters. First is the URL of the file where we're going to send the request to. So basically this file URL. Okay, then it will require the data, which means this data that we need to send it to this file, we need that data. Okay, and then we need a callback function, which means after the jQuery after the AJAX request has been performed, what is being returned from this file, we need to do something in the callback function with this $_post or jQuery dot post or underscore. Okay, great. So I'm gonna do that. So as we know, the first parameter is the URL. So we need to create this URL to this foodstore.php. So to create the URL, we'll go to our index.php file. Okay, and let's open a script tag over here. Okay, I'm going to create a variable called AJAX URL is equal to HTTP, because remember we need the URI, not the just the file address. Okay, HTTP, then PHP, right, PHP, echo dollar underscore. Well, let's close this first. Okay, echo dollar underscore server, HTTP underscore post. Okay, dot dollar underscore server, that's request URI dot food store dot php. Okay, great. So I'll just explain to you how you managed to get this URI. If I just go ahead and echo the server for you, server, okay, so you can see what happens over here. So obviously we have to print this, not echo it, because it's an array. Print. Okay, let's put this semicolon over here. Okay, if we just use a pre tag, so it's clear to us. Okay, alright, so all we're doing over here is just printing this $_server global variable, and as we can see, so it's HTTP, and then we're echoing the HTTP post. So what is HTTP post? Let's see. It's actually host, not post, sorry. Okay, so host is basically mysite.dev, which is here. So HTTP colon 2 / and then mysite.dev, and then request URI, which is, let's see, yep, here, food store. Okay, so which is basically this folder right here. Okay, and then foodstore.php, which is this. Okay, so what we're trying to do over here, so let's just echo this AJAX URL to ensure we've got everything right there. Okay, AJAX URL, sorry, AJAX URL. So as you can see, we've got the URL for our PHP file. Okay, so coming back to what we are doing over here, so as we know, the jQuery.post function requires 3 parameters. First, to the URL of the file that we are trying to send the request to. Okay, so we're going to go back to this function and write URL colon AJAX URL, because we already got that, since the JavaScript file foodstore.js is included in this index.php, and AJAX URL has been defined before calling this file, before including this file, so AJAX URL will be available in this file. Okay, and that's self-explanatory. And then the next thing is the data that we need to pass. Okay, so data. So remember, over here we have defined this field or this property as food, which is why we need to put food over here in the data so it can recognize it. Okay, All right, and we need to put user input. So remember that we have created this user input variable, which is containing the whatever's been entered by the user here, right? So what has been entered over here, we are storing that in this user input variable, and we are passing this information via AJAX um, to this file, because that's the URL we have mentioned over here. So this file. So once we go ahead and send this request via this function, okay, this user input value is made available to $post food. Okay, so food becomes equal to the user input. So whatever has been entered by the user over here, let's say tuna, will be available on this file because of AJAX. So which means that we don't really have to create a form and submit the form, etc. Everything is being done without having to refresh the page, and that's all being accomplished by the AJAX. Okay, because that's the beauty of AJAX. Okay, cool. So we've got the data. Let's see what else we got. So we need URL, we've got URL, we need data, we've got data, and the last thing is the callback function. So what we want to do next after we have passed the data. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we can say dot done. We can do it this way as well, dot done. So once it's done, once that AJAX request is complete, what we want to do is we want to pass the callback function, which is this here, right here. And in this callback function, okay, we are going to get a response. Okay, so this is the variable that we will get the value in this variable automatically as soon as our AJAX request is complete. Just type it as response. Okay, right. So as soon as our AJAX request is complete, we're going to get the response over here. Okay, and response will be having whatever is echoed through this file. Okay, so this message will be equal to this response. Okay, so remember what we're trying to do over here is that we're going to use AJAX to send the user input data, okay, to this file via the URL of this file. Okay, and then after the AJAX request is complete, that data is used in this file, and then this is echoed, and this message that is echoed is stored in response, and we're going to go ahead and use that. Okay, right. So let's just call this process function over here every time user has entered something, and let's see what happens then. Okay, so right now I see nothing is happening. Okay, cool, no problem. All right. All right, so what we're going to do over here is that there is another function which is called dot debounce, underscore dot debounce. So for that we need to download an underscore .js library. Okay, so you can go into underscore.js.org, and you can just click over here and include this file basically in your project. So I'll do that. So I think I've already got that file, so just copy it. Let's create that file, underscore.js touch. Okay, paste it, right, and we're going to include that file here. So script source underscore.js, got that file. Okay, so basically what we want to do is that we want to go ahead and call this function, okay, but we want to ensure that we call this function not every time the user enters this information, enters the input over here, because if he enters the input over here, so you know, the AJAX is going to be, request is going to be performed every now and then, like repeatedly, okay, and that could exert a lot of pressure on the server, and we don't want to do that, okay. So that is the reason we are going to use the dot underscore dot what you call it, yeah, so underscore dot debounce function, okay. All right, before we talk about that, coming back to the code that we are doing, so as you can clearly see, I've called this function, so every time the user enters a value over here, okay, let's say tuna, okay, it says that we don't have tuna, especially because the tuna starts from capital T, and now it says we have tuna. And if you remember that into our array we had chicken too, so if we type chicken, it's going to say we have chicken. So if you can see that this AJAX request is being you know, made every time a key is pressed, because that's what we are saying over here in our JavaScript file. We're saying that every time a key is up, go ahead and call this function, okay. So that's not very healthy for the performance perspective. So what we're going to do is we're going to take help of this debounce function, okay. So we're going to create a variable called test, okay, and we're going to use this function called underscore dot debounce, okay, and it accepts two parameters. First is your function, so we're going to call this function over here, and second is the time. After how much time do you want to call this function, okay. So what's going to happen is that every time the user enters something over here, okay, then the debounce function is going to call this function, process function, which means the AJAX request will be made, but only after the interval of 1 second, 1000 milliseconds equal to 1 second, okay. And this function returns another function, so we need to hold this into test variable, and then we need to call this test function so that it's executed the way it should be. Cool, right, so let's see. So if you realize that when you're typing it, it's not being called immediately, it's being called after 1 second. Say this. You see? If we type here, it's not called immediately, it's called after 1 second. Okay, if we change this to 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3. Okay, got it. Again, 1, 2, 3. Got it. Okay. So which means that this process function, whose job is to send the AJAX request, send this user input, and then whatever response comes, you do something with that. This function is going to be called only after the interval of 3 seconds. Okay, right? So that's pretty much it for the debounce function. And now all we have to do is, so we've got everything that we need, we've got the message that we needed. All we have to do is we need to assign this message to the div, which is the output div, so that we can have it have the message right here onto our browser rather than having it in the console, because that wouldn't make sense, right? Okay, so cool. So what we need to do now is, as we know, we've already got the output div content. Okay, so all we have to do is output div content, which contains the output div dot inner HTML is equal to response. So remember, the response has the message that is outputted by the foodstore.php. So we're going to make that equal to this. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let's type fish. Alright, we don't have fetch. So see, it's been appended. Now we no longer have it in console because we took that off, and we're going to append this response to the div, which is our output div here. So it's been appended. Okay, so if you type something else, tuna, let's see, it's been appended. Okay, so as you can clearly see, the page is not being refreshed. It's all automatic. And let's just reduce this to 1 second because I think 3 seconds will be crazy. You know, user doesn't want to wait 3 seconds to perform the request. So let's say paneer tikka. We have paneer tikka. Brilliant, great, cool. So I think that's pretty much covers everything. So we've got everything that we need. Just to recap, guys, of what we're doing over here. So we have gone ahead and created a input field, which is this right here, which will accept the user's input, whatever food item they want to check whether the food store have it or not. Then what we've done is we've created an output div which will contain the message that the AJAX returns. Okay, and we've got the URL of our file, which is foodstore.php. Remember, there's no link between the index.php and foodstore.php. These are, you know, two separate entities. All the magic is done by AJAX. Okay, so it's the AJAX which is communicating with the PHP you know, file in the backend. So that's the beauty of it. So your user doesn't know what is happening over here because it's the AJAX which is communicating with the PHP file in the backend and getting all the information for us, and we are displaying that information using JavaScript real time. Okay, brilliant. Now next, what we've done is we've included the underscore.js file, which is the library of the JavaScript functions, and out of this library we haven't really used all the functions. All we have used is just the underscore.debounce function, whose job is to call the process function, which means which is basically, you know, requesting the AJAX which is processing the AJAX request after interval of 1 second, because, you know, we don't want to we don't want the AJAX request to be performed every time user enters something. Okay, that would be crazy. Okay, cool. So, and then we've got the jQuery file included over here. Then we have created a file which is JavaScript file foodstore.js, which is where everything is happening. Okay, and then we've got a foodstore.php file, okay, which is basically containing a variable called food, which has got the $_post food. Okay, and this value is basically coming from here, right here. Okay, and then it checks if the user hasn't entered anything, then go ahead and display that please enter the food item you want to order, and that's what's being displayed over here. Else, if he has entered something, let's say cake, then go ahead and, you know, pass this message that whether we have or we don't. In this case we don't have it, so that's the reason this is being displayed. And then eventually, based on the condition, the message is being displayed, which is this. Okay, into coming back to a foodstore.js, this is a self you know, executable function that we're calling over here, and we create a variable called user input, which will be containing the value of the input that's entered by the user. Okay, and this output div content is basically containing this div right here. Okay, and then we have put an event listener saying that you know, every time user enters something over here, okay, on a key app, okay, go ahead and call this function, and then this function we are storing the value of the data entered by the user. Okay, and then we're going ahead and calling this function, debounce function, which is basically calling this process function after every 1 second. Okay, remember that we cannot just call this debounce function like this because this function, debounce function, is returning a function which needs to be stored in test, and then that function will be called. Okay, and then this process function is basically performing the AJAX request, which is accessing this URL and sending this data to food store. This data is being processed like this, and then this is echoing a message, and this message is coming as a response which is being stored in this response variable, and we are going to make this particular div content equal to this response so that we can have all the response being displayed over here. So that's pretty much everything. I hope you liked the video, guys. Maybe a pretty long video, but then it was important to explain every bit of it, and I think I've done a good job in explaining everything. I don't think you would have any questions. If you still do, you can write comments for me. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.